Sí, tienen invitados. Ok. No sé exactamente cuántas personas van a venir hoy, pero aquí viene Kathleen. Muy bien. Excelente. Y Jen también. Ok, esperamos unos minutos. Ah, bueno, y muy buenos días. Vamos a empezar hoy con práctica, con combinaciones de dos verbos y todo eso. We're going to practice with our little two verb combination things and add in some new stuff. New things. I do want to start first. Antes de practicar y hablar un poquito, quiero preguntarles, I want to ask you guys if you had any questions about this video. This is so cute. I loved this. Me encantó, me encantó. He really does everything very tongue in cheek and very clever. ¿Hay alguna pregunta? Any kind of word combination in there that kind of didn't make sense or was hard to pick up or? Oh, no. No. Más o menos. Ok. Más o menos fácil de entender, ¿sí? Y esto también, this too was, and Barbara, I don't know if I sent this to you. Maybe I need to send these to you because you're coming in a little bit later. This was a nice story. And again, it's showing us like different levels of how you can tell the same story, but you can add more complicated ways of expressing the same idea. And just noticing what those differences are to get it up to a more intermediate level. So those were our two videos. And if you had any burning questions from that, then that would be good to ask. But okay.
Necesitamos más de segundo video.
Con las historias en tres niveles. Sí. Creo que existen algunos ejemplos y estoy de acuerdo de que sí, es buena idea tener la misma historia, pero en un nivel muy fácil, otro nivel un poquito más difícil y entonces algo más sofisticado. Es interesante ver si las varias combinaciones de otros verbos o tiempos, the way we can add different kinds of verbs or different flip-flopping between tenses to get that to be, really good practice. And actually, we've got a drill I hope we get to, which is a listening drill that kind of does that, where it really throws the mix in of mixing lots of different tenses up. Hopefully we get time to get to that today. Okay.
One thing I thought was interesting with that, in the easiest version with all present tense, your brain translates it into past tense. He said he is born in the year blah, blah, blah. But your brain thinks he was born because that's just how we say it. But when I went back and looked, he did keep that in present. It just, whatever.
And I think if you're a podcast listener, I noticed that a lot of times, especially if you listen to any history podcasts, they often will tell things almost even in English with present tense. Like they'll pick a famous person to talk about. Oh, this person, he's born in 1748. And so you do see that done a little bit in English, but our brains generally tend to say was born in and flip it right into past tense right away. So we're going to do Yeah, I think I'm going to make sure we make time for that today. A little listening drill where they tell some short stories, and it's going to pick up on asking you what you heard. And it will be, you know, a thing where they flip back and forth between different kinds of tenses. Pero primero, la práctica principal que vamos a hacer hoy es otra vez, vamos a combinar dos verbos. Los más comunes. We took these, which are very, very common verbs last week, just so that you see where we're leaving off from. Here are the verbs that you know, it's kind of that 80-20 rule of you get just 20% of the words that will pop up 80% of the time in a normal conversation. And these are the, so I wanted to do a couple of weeks as an easy kind of lead in with ideas of these two verb combinations: conjugate the first, don't conjugate the second, that pop up continually, frequently in a typical conversation. And last week we focused on querer, necesitar, poder, tener que, right? Talking about wanting, needing, ability to do things, and have to do things. And now we've got a new round of verbs. These are also ones that will pop up a lot. And this one really should be almost on that first list because it's so common. Ir a. Okay. Entonces, vamos a enfocarnos en la práctica con verbos que combinan con o pueden combinar con dos verbos. So we're going to have the same kind of pattern of conjugate the first, and the second one stays as an infinitive. And it's a good way to just pick a plain infinitive and add new kinds of verbs to your vocabulary. And the new verb is something you don't have to conjugate, right? But also these are things that happen a lot, and they have different meanings. This is a little more, well, two of these are a little more sophisticated than that first group we did last week. Ir a, to talk about future activities. This is much more common than the actual future tense, which exists in Spanish, but it's what people use in everyday conversation to talk about what people are going to do. And it's much, much more commonly used than the actual future tense, ir a. And the only complicated thing about that is you have to remember that ir is an irregular verb. And for most people, that isn't too tough because you drill this so much in the easy Spanish levels. Voy, vas, va, vamos, van. Everybody usually learns those forms of ir early on. We're going to add a little twist to that ir a today to make it a little more complicated. La segunda combinación es acabar de. Acabar de, instead of going to future, it actually goes to past. But the wonderful thing about this is acabar de just uses acabar en presente, in present tense. You don't hear it used that much with the past. You hear it used usually in the present tense, but even in that present tense, conjugating the very regular, very easy to use verb of acabar. Acabar really pushes the activity into the past. Now, the only caveat is acabar de means to have just done something. So it has to talk about something recent, something that happened in the last few hours, in the last few minutes, in the last few days. Once you start getting into last week, last month, acabar de is not as useful. But for recent activity, it's very easy because you just need the present tense of acabar de, but you can talk about something that happened just a little while ago. Okay. Bueno, la tercera combinación de verbos es volver a. Volver a. Volver means to return, or if it's by itself, to return, to come back. Okay, those are two good translations of the verb volver. but volver is often used with a and a second verb. And this one is a little more challenging for most people to get used to because you're so used to thinking of volver, to return, to come back. But it means to come back to an activity. In other words, it's a frequent way of saying again. Somebody does something again. And I know we've got, we'll take a look at the other word combinations that mean again, but this is kind of a frequently used combination, volver a and the infinitive. Y por fin, muy fácil, gustar. Gustar is often used in those two verb combinations. Often, so often, to like to do something. And now will be not talking about liking things, but liking activities, right? So that is a super easy one to use. But again, we'll add a little twist to bump it up a little bit. Okay, primero, ir a, y voy a engrandecer la pantalla un poquito aquí. Ir a. Okay, these are a little more specialized in meaning. You have to think a little bit more, well, except for this one. This one you don't have to think about too hard. Ir a, an infinitive. This is the go-to. It is the go-to. It pops up all the time to talk of what is going to happen soon, okay? Future tense does have some different uses than what we do with it in English when you're looking at the Spanish version of a future tense, but this is the conversational way of talking about activities. The thing you want to remember is never, never, never leave out that little word ah. Even though it's brief, even though it's going to slide right into the next word, don't leave out the ah. Okay, so you always need to have that little word, right? Some two verb combinations have nothing between themselves and the verb, but ir a does, acabar de does have an extra word, volver a needs an extra word, and this one doesn't need anything special. Okay, back to ir a. Y vamos a practicar. Esto es muy fácil. This is really easy. We don't even have to do a preemptive practice. And a good thing too for increasing your fluency or making it easier to speak is when people are thinking about conjugations. Actually, I should go back to this screen a little bit. This is a tip that is often given for people who say, I have a hard time getting ideas out when I speak. And that is when you are practicing verbs, whether they're present, past, whatever tense that might be, always start with, instead of memorizing all 5 or 6 conjugations, always make sure you know the yo form and the nosotros form. Yeah. And the nosotros is always an easy one to learn because it'll have a mos in some way tagged on with a different kind of vowel combination before the mos. But always know the yo and the nosotros form because we most often need to express things about ourselves and the group we're in. And the others will come later with more listening practice, but always make sure you know yo nosotros first. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take that advice of yo, la forma de yo, la forma de nosotros. Y esta combinación es la combinación quizás más común de todos los verbos en este grupo y es la combinación más fácil de practicar. Okay. So I want everybody to go out into some small rooms and use a couple of examples with voy a, and then of course add an extra idea, right? Not just voy a caminar, but add extra information about where or when or with whom, or how, right? So voy a caminar. Voy a caminar con mi vecina hoy a las 2:30. Hoy Voy a caminar con mi vecina, with my neighbor, a las 2:30, see, at 2:30. And then you can even tag on extra clauses, meaning extra mini sentences to add more information once you get your feet wet and you get more comfortable. So, entonces, voy a añadir una idea más con una cláusula. I'm going to add a little extra clause. Voy a caminar con mi vecina a las 2:30 porque, porque hace buen tiempo hoy. Porque la temperatura es ideal. Así, ¿bien? ¿Ok? ¿Vale? ¿Entienden? Easy one to start with. And we gave a different example down here. Voy a copiar el video en YouTube a las 2. I'm going to copy the video over to YouTube at 2:00. Sí, es otra idea. So always add on something extra. You'll see that list of the little prompts when you go into the breakout rooms. Uy, ¿dónde está? Sí, mi breakout room. Aquí, bien. Ah, pu, pu, pu. A ver. Bien, perfecto. Ok. Tengo que enviar las ideas a todos los cuartos. Creo que ¿cuánto tiempo vamos a practicar? Quizás 7 minutos, como 7 minutos. Ok, vale. Voy a usar mi cronómetro en mi nuevo reloj inteligente. And we're going to add a little twist to some of these because ir a is really easy to use. So when everybody comes back and kind of compares the easy warm-up examples, we'll get into how to use that on kind of a higher level. Well, definitely, not even kind of. Definitely on a higher level. Vamos a ver. Ok. Tengo que escribirles a los estudiantes un mensaje muy breve para que sepan que vamos a regresar dentro de poco. Ok. Excelente. Bien. Y algo fácil, ¿sí? An easy warm-up. Ejemplos muy fáciles para el primer ejercicio. Yeah. Easy stuff for the very first round.
Yeah, sí, sí.
So that doesn't bust your brain. Because, yeah, you know, hard to bust the brain early in the morning.
How do you say I even got? Because I even got an acabo day in there.
Oh.
Just because that was what I was going to say. So how would you say I even? What is even?
Y también usé, y
también.
también usé, y en adición usé
También.
otro ejemplo, sí, eso es. Ok, vale. Los ejemplos más fáciles para la primera práctica, ¿verdad? Ok. ¿Alguna pregunta? Any question about these or any examples you want to share? ¿Quieren ustedes compartir un ejemplo?
No do acuerdo.
No? Bien, okay.
No.
Muy fácil. So your challenge here is maybe just adding that extra bit of information, right? Because you know how to use these. Okay. So just as in the video that showed us the story at 3 different levels, let's take a look at what happens because something very special happens when we want to use this ir a, but when we want to use it not to talk about right now or what's going to happen, if we want to use ir a to talk about what will happen, eso es sí, es fácil, ¿verdad? That's easy. But what if the idea you need to express is not, I'm going to leave at 8, but something like this, he was going to come at 8. You know, we were going to do this. And we have to do something different. We have to do something different with that verb ir if we want to talk about not I am going to do it, but I was going to do it. And the thing that you have to do, and you don't get a choice, and it will sound weird if you don't use it this way, is to express, to use ir a in the past and say what somebody was going to do. You have to go with imperfecto. And this is not something that you can flip into pretérito. Because in pretérito, the person you're speaking to will think, that's weird. Why did they say that? All I can tell you is don't puzzle over why it does that. It just, that's the way it's used. Okay. So to say that somebody was going to do something, we're going to use ir in imperfecto. No. So the difficult thing about this is that ir si es irregular. It is a very irregular verb in imperfecto, right? It's one of the three that are irregular in imperfecto. But again, we're going to take that bit of advice of, for starters, just practice with yo and nosotros forms. Yo, nosotros. So we get iba, and you may or may not hear a yo, depending on if it has to be explained, right? If there is no context, people will add the word yo. But often, as a conversation rolls along, people will not add a pronoun with this verb, right? So keep that in mind. They may use it, they may not. Depends on the context. So we're going to focus on the yo form, iba, and the nosotros form, which always gets a mos, but in this case, we've got a tag on in front of the mos, íbamos. Iba, íbamos. Iba, iba a, íbamos a. Okay, those are the two forms we're going to practice. This is a little more complicated, and it means was going to do something. Let's get an example. Un ejemplo. Vamos a añadir un ejemplo aquí. En un contexto muy muy frecuente de la conversación. Por ejemplo, Luis iba de llegar a las 8. Pero no está. But he's not here.
Why iba day? Why iba day?
Oh, iba a, perdón.
Sí, oh, sí.
Gracias. Iba a. I'm thinking ahead to my next slide. My brain is going okay, dyslexic. Luis iba a llegar a las 8, pero no está. Pero todavía mejor, aún mejor, even better. Pero todavía no está. But he's not here yet.
Mhm.
Pero todavía no está. ¿Qué pasó? Hey, what happened to him? Bien, see? Okay. So here's all the stuff that, here's something that adds extra information when. This adds more information. I expected this, but uh-oh, this thing didn't happen, right? And this might be a logical follow-up. Hey, what happened to him? How come he didn't come? Luis iba a llegar a las 8, pero todavía no está. ¿Qué pasó? Okay, so I want you to use just the iba a, and íbamos a, pero 4 ejemplos. This is probably going to take you a little bit longer because that first one was the easy level. So I'm going to make sure I give you a full 7 minutes, sí, 7 minutos, para pensar un poquito en buenos ejemplos. I will send this slide into your rooms so that you see the example.
Marilyn, is it,
Sí, perdón.
other than it sounding just a tad funny, is there anything wrong with the phrasing of iba a ir, I was going to go?
Iba a ir, sí se puede usar. Was going to go, sí, se puede decir. You can say that. Todo bien, claro. That works too. Yeah, we can use ir like back, fold back on itself. That can happen. And I've got the example sent into your rooms. Okay. Y 7 minutos. Ok, nos quedan 3 minutos. This combination of IVA A and IVA más A is a little bit harder for people to generally process because it's not what you're expecting to hear, that voy a gets so ingrained and that becomes a natural pattern, but that IVA A is not always a natural pattern. And, pretty often people are sifting around between, should I, pretérito imperfecto, do I switch between preterite or imperfect? And here you don't even think about that preterite thing, right? You have to go straight for the iba a. So it's a pattern you kind of need to lock into your brain cells to use it in past. Voy a decirles que vamos a regresar pronto. Vale. Okay.
We're having a good time.
Ah, excelente.
We're
Me
having,
gusta.
I told her we're having a good time.
Yes, I have a question for you,
Sí, sí,
Marilyn.
dime.
This was my question. Iba a cantar en el coro, pero I was in Minnesota. So the I was, it could be fui, era, estuve, or estuva.
Eso
And
es,
I guessed estuve.
okay. Estuve, if you add a little more information to make that,
It's an event.
yeah,
I was in Minnesota el lunes. Maybe.
perfecto. Perfecto.
Oh.
And if you kind of don't add that as a closed event, so you might hear estuve or estaba. You might hear either one. Y depende, and it depends. Yeah. Iba a cantar en el coro, pero estaba en Minnesota. If it's just describing that I was there and therefore couldn't participate, estaba might feel more natural. But if you want to emphasize, ooh, here were the days I was there. Estuve en Minnesota el lunes. Así. Okay, so people may pick either estuve or estaba, but it depends on the whole context of that message.
Okay.
If the whole context is, I want to tell you the time period, estuve may feel a little more, may be the more natural pick.
And
But if
neither
it's-
fui or era is right because those don't have to do with location.
See, right, they don't have to do with location. If you want to say went to, then
Oh,
fui.
yeah.
See? Porque
Great.
fui a Minnesota because I went there. And that works. Así. See? Bien. You know what? These verbs often are the ones that we tend to, our English brains have a real hard time sorting these out because they're irregular verbs to start with. They have irregulars in the present and past. And, our brains do a real kind of thing with sorting out which things to use. Sí. Okay. Otros
question.
ejemplos. Sí, Bárbara.
Una pregunta también. Por ejemplo, una persona puede decir, iba a caminar, pero no podía encontrar mis zapatos.
Sí.
But if you put ayer, is that específico que tienes que cambiar?
Si digo ayer.
Ayer I was going to walk.
Ayer iba a caminar, siempre es ayer iba a caminar. Even if we've got that signal word ayer. Tienes buena pregunta, Bárbara, ¿sí? Muchas veces decimos, hay palabras especiales que se refieren al tiempo, que indican pretérito, 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 como ayer, la semana pasada, el domingo, así.
Anoche.
Anoche, exacto. Y esas palabras del tiempo indican, cuidado, cuidado, sí, pretérito, pretérito, pero con la idea de I was going to.
Okay.
Es algo muy específico y siempre se usa iba a.
Oh, siempre, por ejemplo, anoche iba al cine, pero no tenía el dinero para ir.
Anoche, ok, es una
Ah.
cosa decir, anoche fui al cine. Es buen ejemplo. Anoche fui al cine, pero no tenía mi cartera, así que no vi nada. Last night I went to the movies, but I didn't have my wallet, so I didn't see anything. Yeah, sí,
Sí.
no entré en el cine, pero es otra cosa. Anoche iba a ir al cine,
Sí.
pero no tenía dinero.
Okay. So it's imperfecto. Anoche iba a ir al cine,
Sí.
pero no tenía. Okay.
Okay. Anoche last night I was going to, and I can't really give you a why of why that happens, except maybe to say it's describing kind of a state of where you were at. Hey, I was going to do this, and it didn't really start or end at a specific time. Yeah. So
Okay.
anytime we, so the only thing you need to do is that it doesn't require mental gymnastics. If what you mean is I was going to do this or he was going to do this, right? And you're either wondering about the outcome or you're saying why it didn't happen or, whatever, lo que sea, whatever it might be. You don't have to think hard about it at all. There are no mental gymnastics. Iba a. Boom, that's it. Even if it's ayer, even if it's el domingo, okay? That particular idea of somebody was going to is always going to be expressed as iba a.
Iba. Okay.
And you don't
Does-
have to think about it. Sí.
Does the following phrase then have to stay in imperfecto or can it be in present? Iba a cocinar un plato, pero no tenía un ingrediente o no tengo un ingrediente.
Los dos, depende.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
people
Okay.
might flip-flop and use
Okay.
either. Just as in English, gee, I was going to cook, but I don't have the right ingredients. Or I was going to cook, but I didn't have the right ingredients. We might say either one of those in English. They might follow up with either one of those in Spanish, right?
Okay.
And that's the thing we have to be prepared for, is that people are going to flip between that present and past,
Okay.
just like we do, right? And we in English don't do mental gymnastics to do that, but it might become mental gymnastics, right? But either way, people might use either thing depending on just what they're thinking at that moment.
Or
Sí.
el pretérito podría estar correcto.
Sí, sí.
So, like, iba a dormir más tarde, pero mi gato me despertó.
Perfecto.
Sí.
Sí, Kathleen, qué buen ejemplo. Pero mi gato me despertó, but my cat woke me up. ¿Sí? Y no diríamos en inglés, but my cat was waking me up. No, my cat woke me up. ¿Sí? Mi perro me despertó. My dog woke me up. Así es. So, yeah, whichever tense following to add on new ideas makes sense, right? You got to be willing to maybe flip around between the tense that makes sense for what you want to say. Es buen ejemplo, Kathleen. Muchísimas gracias. Okay. ¿Otro ejemplo o?
Acá. iba a preparar, iba a cocinar al cine, pero ya no tengo ganas a cocinar.
Perfecto.
En el
Sí,
presente, entonces.
perfecto.
Okay.
¿Sí? Lo que sigue, whatever follows, depends on the idea you're trying to show. Okay, por ejemplo, I'm going to show you. We're going to go back to this, ¿sí? Iba a llegar a las 8, pero todavía no está. He was going to come at 8, but he's still not here. And todavía no está en presente, right? ¿Qué pasó? What happened? Pretérito. Yeah. So depending on the idea you want to convey, we may go into a number. There is no one right answer.
Sí.
There's no one right follow-up to add on. It depends on what context is up here that you need to convey. ¿Sí? Hay muchas posibilidades cuando añadimos información. When we add on information, there are many different combinations that are possible. ¿Ok? Bien. Es más complicado. This is more complex than that. Voy a, vamos a, voy a, vamos a. You don't have to think. And why don't you have to think very hard about voy a y vamos a? Because you've done it so darn many times. It is a natural thing. But the iba a is not as natural a combination to get used to. Okay. ¿Hay otro ejemplo de iba a o hay alguna pregunta más de iba a? Any other question or no? Bien. Okay.
I have
Adelante.
one quick one about weather.
Sí, sí.
Íbamos a nadar, pero es demasiado frío. Can I just say it's too cold, or do I have to say it makes cold, or it has cold, or
Oh, sí.
Con el tiempo, weather becomes a little bit of a challenge. So let's take a quick look.
Diane understood me perfectly, but that's because we're both
But that's
gringos.
because you're English speakers. Yeah, sí, por eso. Okay, a ver.
Gringos.
El
Gringos.
clima, el tiempo. This is something where there are certain verbs that are more likely to pop up. But there are many verbs, but let's like narrow it down to the maybe most common or the most frequent. You might have hace because it makes weather, right? In Spanish, the weather makes things happen quite often. So hace is used with a lot of phrases to talk about weather, pero hace demasiado frío, but it is too cold, meaning it is too cold right now. You could just as easily say it was too cold. Es posible también, yeah? We were going to swim, but it is too cold. We were going to swim, but it was too cold. You might say that either way. Así en español también, ¿sí? Los dos. So, hace is used for a lot of, so hace frío, hacía frío, bien, así. Another verb that gets used a lot with clima is está, ¿sí? Another verb that gets used a lot with weather is hay. Those three are the most common, but then we've got a good thing to keep in mind is that those precipitation, sí, puedo deletrear, yeah, I can spell. Precipitation verbs most likely are going to use their own verb. So for these, the most common type of precipitation events are these two, right? So llover and nevar are the raining and snowing things are a little bit apart from these. They are verbs on their own, but weather expressions are often going to use one of these three combinations, and it really depends on the type of weather condition you want to talk about. Okay? Sí, bien?
Gracias.
Okay. Perfecto, perfecto. Adelante, adelante, adelante. La próxima combinación es acabar de. Acabar de es más fácil. This is easier, a little bit easier because really you're going to use it in presente. You're not going to hear it used very much in other tenses. Acabar de is usually, you know, a presente kind of thing. But it really indicates something that just happened, but it's got to be recent past. So that's the only little caveat, the little warning we need to add on. It needs to be a recent past, something that happened, probably if it's not in the today, if it's not on the timeline of today, then, or if it is on the timeline of today, acabar de works. Yeah. It can be more recent than today. It can be this morning. It can be in the last couple of minutes, right? Once you get past the today timeline, then it becomes less useful. Then you've got to go into something that really talks about, you know, pretérito. But acabar de. Okay, we're going to follow this same sequence of making sure we kind of nail down the nosotros, or yo y nosotros, formas de yo, formas de nosotros, ¿sí? Vamos a practicar. But we do need this word de. This again is one of those verbs like ir a. You absolutely need to have that word de. Okay. What happens if you forget and you leave it out? Well, okay. It'll sound funny to them. Will they understand that what you mean? Probably, but you know, they'll have, it's the bada boom, bada boom. They got to think a little harder if you leave out the de word. So, combinaciones. This one, I don't think we need quite a 7 minute, maybe a 5 minute, 5 minutos, sí. Necesitan 5 minutos nada más.
Sí.
I think you need for this one because it's a little bit easier to do. A ver, bueno. Y, vamos a ver, sí, because I know we had one person who had to leave. Sí, aquí, bien, 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 bien. Y voy a añadir, sí, las combinaciones, las frases. Los grupos. Okay, and we're going to go with a shorter time period for this one. I just don't think you need more than 5 minutes to use acabar de. Este ejemplo sí es fácil. Okay. Ok, vale, bien. Y aquí vamos. Here we go. Vale, muy bien. Aquí vienen casi todos. Here comes almost everybody. Y gracias, Bárbara, para inscribirte en, sí, la
sí,
clase de la mañana, ¿sí?
Sí,
Bien.
muy bien, y gracias para su,
No hay problema.
para dar aceptancia a mí.
Oh,
Sí.
no hay problema, no hay problema, claro, no. Sí, muchas veces alguien en la oficina de Scottsdale me pregunta, oh, está bien si alguien viene un poquito, sí, la próxima semana, sí, siempre está
Oh,
bien.
muy bien, gracias porque la Navidad pasó tan
Ay,
rápido.
así,
Oh,
así.
boy.
Sí, es una temporada muy, muy ocupada para todos, creo. Así que es difícil. Ok, bien. Acabo de fácil, ¿no? Fácil.
Sí.
Ok.
See,
Ah,
we had a question.
Oh,
sí.
So, we were trying to use the sort of the verb slash phrase ir de compras, to go shopping.
Sí.
And, so, I'm just struggling a little bit on whether any further conjugation was needed in that phrase. As in, acabamos de ir de compras.
Perfecto.
And that's it?
oh,
Así. Sí. Acabamos de ir de compras. We
okay.
just went shopping.
Ah,
Y, sí, es un poquito complicado. Ya, ir de compras es una combinación muy natural para expresar ir al supermercado o a alguna tienda, ¿sí? Ir de compras. And de compras is, the de compras part is not a verb. It's just de compras. It's like purchasing. Yeah. Purchases, compras there talks about really the stuff that's getting bought. Yeah. De compras. Ir de compras should always just hangs together, right? And the only thing you got to sort of think about is the ir part of that. Acabo de ir de compras. Nada más. Nothing else. Perfecto. Okay. Bien. But we only really talk about things that are recent there. And there people may not even add a time period because everybody knows that means recent. So people may not feel, maybe, sí. Acabo de llegar. Algo muy común de escuchar es acabo de llegar. I just got here. See, acabo de llegar, right? Somebody looks at you, you're standing in line, acabo de llegar, right? Or you just walked in the office, somebody doesn't know you just came in, acabo de llegar. Okay, and often that won't be defined with, a when, because people know it's just now or just recently kind of thing. And this acabar de is something that, and I have my, okay. Something I do want to show you here is that the acabar de won't really, you're not going to hear it a lot in pretérito or imperfecto. I mean, you might, maybe if you were reading a novel, there might be a specific context, but in terms of everyday conversation, you're not going to hear this acabar de used with pretérito imperfecto. It just kind of goes away, right? Because those other two past tenses take over for other discussions. So acabar isn't going to get conjugated very frequently in those other tenses, right? Preterite is the preferred in Latin America. Spain may do some other things, para que sepan, so that you know, right? Spain does use pretérito, but they like to use a combination of haber and a past participle to talk about something that happened just today. Okay, Spaniards like a structure that is a little bit different. And all these are our structures. Okay, so that haber meaning has, hemos, han, plus like he comido, hemos, hemos visto esa película. We have seen that movie, right? Ellos han llegado. They have arrived, meaning they got here fairly recently. That's just a structure to talk about the past. Preterite is another kind of structure to talk about the past. They both talk about the past, and people in Latin America and Spain understand each other, that each region has its own preferences. Preterite takes over almost all the time in Latin America. But if you're speaking with a Spaniard or visiting a place in Spain, just know that structure of present perfect is what we call that. Sometimes happens if you're talking about what happened recently today. Okay. The ones that most of us need to think about more often are pretérito, because it's so complicated, right? It's got so many irregulars, and imperfecto, because that's the descriptive mode, or talking about, repeated actions. So just know, acabar de, you're going to use it in presente. You're not going to use it outside of presente very often. It just won't be used a lot. Okay, a ver.
Marilyn,
Sí.
for using acabar de, how far back would still be kind of recent enough to use it?
Today.
Sorry,
Okay.
say that again?
Today.
Today.
Hoy. Okay, en general. And that kind of, again, depends on what you're talking about. Today might even be stretching it a little bit, right? It might be just the last few hours. It might be, we're in morning, so it has to be between 6 a.m. and now. Okay, so it's gotta be recent, right? If somebody, okay, por example, here's a common context which would come up. You meet somebody in a cafe or a restaurante, see, and you sit down and have a cup of coffee, and maybe you're going to order something with that cup of coffee, right? If it's 10 o'clock now, he comido, I have eaten. No voy a pedir nada más. I'm not going to order anything else. He comido, I have eaten. You'll have something to drink, but you're not going to eat. He comido. And that's recent, right? But if you fast forward into the let's say 7 p.m., 8 p.m. time period, that won't be an he comido, what happened back in the morning. That's a little too far back. So it depends on the context, the time context. That makes
¿Cómo se-
sense.
¿Cómo se dice, I just got back from vacation, even if it was like 2 days ago?
Ah, 2 days ago, probably not acabo de llegar. ¿Sí? Llegó de mis vacaciones. Yeah. 2 days ago is a little too far ago, probably, right? But you know, if you're talking, see, again, it all depends on the context. Let's say you got back 2 days ago, but let's say you're talking with your boss about PTO time. That's a little different. And you know, your boss says to you, you just got back from I'm not approving any more time. You just got back. And, okay. And he might, acabas de llegar. You just got back. And he's referring to that. So, you know, the context is a little different. You might not say your office mates, because it happened 2 days ago. Acabo de llegar de mis vacaciones, right? But todo depende. Yeah, it all kind of depends. If your boss wants to make it kind of recent because he's telling you no more PTO time, es otra cosa. It's a different thing. See? Okay.
Acabo de limpiar mi dormitorio.
Sí, eso
2
es.
semanas.
So you,
Yes.
so you really cannot say acabo de llegar ayer. No.
You can, but that's stretching it a little bit.
Yeah.
People, yeah, you know what? People are going to say, well, that was yesterday. Yeah, pretérito just makes more sense to them in that case. Acabo de serves the purpose of telling somebody, ooh, just
happened.
a bit ago. Yeah. Or maybe your significant other gets home from, you know, went out to do something, go exercise, and you say, ooh, I just got this and this and this done, you know, all this morning or all this afternoon while you were out. Acabar de then makes sense. ¿Sí? Bien. Bárbara, ¿tienes pregunta?
Or would you say, if it was 2 days you've been back from the vacation, por ejemplo, hace 2 días que llegué de mi vacaciones?
Hace 2 días que llego de mis vacaciones.
Que llego.
Hace, sí, o ago, sí, no, perdón, sí, pretérito. Hace 2 días que llegué, sí, correcto,
Okay.
correcto. I got ago, that ago idea is hace period of time and then pretérito. That's a specific structure, which is a little more complicated. We'll talk about that in yet another time. Es buena idea. It's a good idea. ¿Sí? Bien. A ver. We're going to not get quite as far as I wanted to today, but that's okay. I'm kind of deciding here last minute which item goes on the back burner. Okay. And I just made an executive decision. Here we go. Out of all these verbs we're going to do, I got to make sure I fit it in the time we've got. See, bien? We're going to take a look at this because this is an easy chunk to work with. Yeah, this easy chunk. Volver a, y momentito. Oh, volver a. Vamos a ver. We're going to take a look at the two of these. Because with the time we've got left, I think this is the chunk that makes the most sense to do. Volver a infinitivo. And again, this little a, ¿sí? A la palabra a es muy importante, ¿sí? Volver a. And this one is tough for English speakers to get used to, but it's just another way of saying again. And this might be used in presente. It might flip into pretérito very easily. Okay. But just like there are definite tenses and you don't have to think hard about which tense do I use, either presente to say I am doing it again, or we're doing this again, okay? But if you want to talk about the past, like I did this again, or he did this again, yeah? Then it's going to flip into pretérito. You don't have to think about imperfecto or pretérito. It'll be pretérito if you want to use this idea with the past. Okay, bien? Okay. Y vamos a ver, let's take a look. I think maybe we'll do these together. See? It is a stem changer for presente, not for pretérito, but for presente it is. So, the yo form we're going to work is vuelvo a, vuelvo a. The nosotros form goes back to the o because stem changes, right, for nosotros don't need a stem change. Volvemos a, okay, to do something again. And this one I want to do all together because of our time limits. This is just another way of saying these two phrases. It's another way of saying otra vez. It's another way of saying de nuevo. Those are the two again phrases in Spanish that are the most common. It also means again. It means again, but it's using the verb to say the again idea. Vuelvo a, volvemos a, uses that verb volver for the again idea, right? So in other words, we wouldn't repeat otra vez or de nuevo if we're using this verb. Yeah. Bien, it's a way of saying again without having to use this phrase, okay? It's a pretty common structure. Okay, vamos a ver un ejemplo aquí. Ya vuelvo a limpiar la cocina. You're sick of cleaning up after everybody, right? And you're saying, oh, I'm doing this again. Why is this such a mess, right? Ya vuelvo a limpiar la cocina. Bien. You could just as easily say, limpio la cocina otra vez, right? Or de nuevo, right? Otra vez or de nuevo work with the plain old single verb by itself. Limpio la cocina otra vez. Limpio la cocina de nuevo. The de nuevo or otra vez work with the verb limpio, with the one single verb, right? But I can eliminate this otra vez phrase. I can eliminate the de nuevo phrase if I use volver a plus an infinitive. Okay, I'm using the verb vuelvo a, volvemos a, to get rid of that otra vez or de nuevo phrase.
And is that translating as vuelvo a limpiar la cocina as I'm cleaning the kitchen again? I mean, is it just?
It means again. It means
So
again.
it's an I am doing this thing.
I'm doing this thing again.
Okay.
Yeah. And the thing I'm doing again is the infinitivo part of it. It tells you what it is that somebody's doing again. So literally, it's like saying, I'm coming back to this task. And that means again. It's just a way that they often like to use to express the again idea. And well, what's more common? Depends on what somebody feels like using. That's all you can say. See? So, vuelvo a limpiar la cocina. Otro ejemplo. Another example. En presente.
Vuelvo a ir al Grand Canyon con mi familia.
Eso sí. And people already know you mean again. Oh, you've done it before. You're doing it again. See? Sí. Volvemos a practicar esta frase. Volvemos a practicar esta idea. See? We're practicing this idea again.
Ujú.
¿Ok? ¿Vale? ¿Bien? Sí,
vu-
Marcos.
Vuelvo a mirar el partido por la tele.
Eso sí. Bien. Sí.
What was the word you said, Mark? You're gonna watch something?
Watch the game.
El partido.
Oh, el partido.
Sí.
Vuelvo a ver el partido, ¿sí? En la tele. Perfecto. Perfecto.
How about saying that your team won again? Su equipo volví a ganar el título.
Sí. What if you want to say one? If you want to say one, it's not very common to say they're winning. Well, you don't, you're less likely to hear, let's phrase it this way. You're less likely to hear they're winning again, but you're very likely to hear, ooh, they won again.
Mm.
They lost again. Es otra cosa. Es buen contexto. Es buen ejemplo. To say that, to put it into the past, instead of using de nuevo, instead of using otra vez, it's very common to take, and this is super, super common, to take volver, put it in pretérito.
Mm.
And then it means that thing happened again. You're not likely to hear this structure in imperfecto. You're likely to hear it in pretérito. So let's take the team. It's not the yo form. So, okay.
Oh,
Sí,
yeah.
Oh, volvió.
sí. El equipo
Ujú.
volvió a
Volvió.
ganar.
Yeah.
Ah, el equipo.
The game, the team won again. The team won again. ¿Sí? Volvió a ganar. O volvió a perder. They lost again.
Yotis.
En el caso, sí, estamos así, estaríamos muy, muy, muy tristes. We would be very sad. Volvió a perder, volvió a perder, volvió a perder. They lost again. Sí. A ver, sí, muy común, very, very common. So, in this case, again, if you want to get used to the structure, volví a. Volver goes into a regular preterite pattern, which means it's an ER verb. And for Joe, it's going to be volví a, I did something again. Volvimos a, we did something again. See, bien? But you're pretty likely to hear, like talking about the team, oh, he did this again, she did this again, they did this again. So I wanted you to see how that feels, how that sounds, how that looks when we're talking not in the yo form, not in the nosotros form. ¿Sí? Mi colega en la oficina volvió a. Mi colega en la oficina volvió a trabajar en ese proyecto. My colleague at the office worked on that project again.
Sí.
Durante el mes de enero, mi colega en la oficina volvió a trabajar en ese proyecto, por ejemplo. ¿Sí? Bien.
Sí.
Mis hijos o mis nietos volvieron volvieron a viajar a Nueva York o lo que sea, wherever that place might be, right? Volvieron a viajar a Nueva York. They traveled to New York again. So this combination you're very likely to hear or read or hear on the news a lot. This is used a lot in news broadcasts when something happened again. You're likely to hear it in other conjugations quite a lot. So it's kind of helpful to know beyond the yo and the nosotros form, right? Volvió a, volvieron a. Así, like that. See? Okay. A ver. I want to preview something because we're coming towards the end. And I know some people will have appointments. I left towards the end, so I'll have you kind of prep this. Gustar es muy fácil. Out of all this combination of words, gustar es muy fácil. Gustar is so easy to use in presente. You barely have to think about presente, right? What you do have to remember is that if we're talking about somebody liking an activity, gustar is different from these other verbs. Yeah. And gustar for the yo form and for the nosotros form, it's really going to look at these two little pronouns and not the verb. Yeah. Because gustar, we don't use a yo form unless you're talking about somebody thinking hubba hubba, wow, what a hot person over at the other side of the bar. Okay. So the pronoun is going to tell who likes to do something. We use gustar. It's only going to be gusta because when we combine gustar with an activity, un infinitivo, it's always gusta, right? So the idea of the yo is going to be me gusta infinitivo, nos gusta infinitivo. Okay, vale? So this is different than from the other verbs, right? Because what you're really saying is this thing, doing this thing is pleasing to somebody, right? Bien? Okay. So it'll be easy for you when you come back in. This will be like the voy a combination. This will be easy for you to come back in and practice next week. But the preterite part of it is going to be a little bit more difficult. So I want you to think about that a little bit harder. So the presente form is really easy, but gustar to talk about the past might take two different forms. And it really depends on what your background context is. Yeah. If you're talking about a habit or something that was frequent, you're going to have to do the mental gymnastics about thinking about imperfecto and pretérito, right? A habit is going to use gustaba. Okay. Because essentially the idea behind this is used to. If it was a habit, it happened a bunch of times. And I don't know how often, just a lot. Yeah, see? Bien? And this is going to carry over into whether we use an infinitive or things, by the way. But, you know, for activities, because we're using two verbs together, we're talking about the activity thing. It's going to be infinitivo, see? Me gustaba infinitivo. Nos gustaba infinitivo. But for something that happened and was over, like your reaction to something, then that pretérito is going to take over. So I want you to think about some examples of these two for next week. These are a little bit harder than this presente idea. So you're going to warm up with the easy idea, and we're going to go next week into this past idea. ¿Sí? Bien?
Yeah.
Okay, vale. So think of some examples of that for next week. And what I am going to send you will be, well, I'll pick a listening story for next week. I've got to think about that a little bit. I think I prefer to have you have a story where you notice people going to different tenses rather than giving you strictly a grammar kind of video. Sí, ¿está bien?
Yeah.
¿Está
Sí.
bien? Yeah, sí. Okay, vale, perfecto. Okay.
Dios.
Vamos a ver, and I think I've got an easy little reading I would like you to read, and it won't be about you know, really noticing present or past or any of that. It's just like a nice article that was not too hard to read, and it's talking about hiking and why you should and what it does for you and all that good stuff. Es fácil de leer, so you're going to get a video and an easy thing to read. And I think what I would like to do with that article is to have folks, you'll see the article. I would like people to practice a little bit and spend a little time next week, because it was brought up that doing some reading and doing it aloud together in class helps us to work on our pronunciation a little bit. So we're going to take some excerpts from this and have people do a little bit of pronunciation practice, but you'll see it in advance so you can practice ahead of time. ¿Está bien? All good?
Está bien, sí, gracias.
Perfecto. Muy bien, muy bien. Excelente. Y bueno, eso es todo para hoy.